Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com. Also, this segment on Baylor Athletics brought to you by Richard Carr Motors. Grayson, Baylor, before we get into some of the offers, look, the transfer portal is closed for students, athletes to jump into it, but it's not closed for people to commit. Do you sense any movement on the horizon for Baylor in picking up players that they may need?
Right. So, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit, Paul, just the amount of spots that Baylor may have to utilize with the transfer portal. And after the two additions so far this spring with Byron Bonds and Trevin Maya, you're kind of looking at a situation where I believe they have one spot left. And the position that I've been kind of mentioning a ton on this show as well as on our premium side, it just seems like cornerback is the position that they're really, really focused on. They actually have a visitor in town this weekend. Actually, I believe he should be starting his visit like right now or within the next 30 minutes or so. But Utah State cornerback Johnny Carter, he was the guy who got a Baylor offer very early in the process. He took a visit to Indiana this week, and then he's at Baylor this weekend. And I believe he should be making his decision after this trip, likely between those two schools. So that'll be something to definitely keep an eye on. I think if he did choose Baylor, I think that would fill up Baylor's roster spots, and I think they would be done with the transfer portal. But you are exactly right. Guys can't enter the portal now as long as they're not grad transfers. The rules for grad transfers are a little bit different, but you can enter the portal currently if you're a player, but you can absolutely pick up commitments, and guys don't necessarily need to make decisions really for the next month. You know, you would think that most guys would want to decide before June because in June, obviously, you're going to go enroll at whatever school you choose for that first summer one session. So that's kind of the timeline I'd say in the next month. But for Baylor, I think things could probably be decided in the next week.
So, Grayson, what is the connection, if any, to Utah State? What's the appeal for, not only Byron Bonds, but perhaps another player as well? I know Dave Aranda coached there long ago, so it can't be, like that connection like he just left there or anything. But is there anything in particular, or is that just a program that happens to just be a coincidence?
It's actually all about getting back to Texas, Craig. I mean, both the guys, so Byron Bonds played in Texas in high school, and then obviously went to Texas. And then Johnny Carter also played football in high school in Texas as well. So really it's just, pretty much about coming back home, somewhere closer to home where their families can see them. The travel's not as extensive. And so, yeah, I think it's more so about that than necessarily the Utah State connection.
Grayson, now some quarterback offers going out as they focus, 2024, 2025 right now?
Right. So, I mean, that's kind of been it's so interesting, right? Because they've been putting out multiple 2025 quarterback offers, but then you look at the 2024 class and they haven't offered anyone since missing on Haas Haney and Deuce Adams to TCU and Louisville, respectively. And now they're really just taking their time with the 2024 class to try to figure out who they want to offer. They have a few guys on their radar, a few guys who visited campus and guys who Sean Bell has visited over the last few weeks as the coaches have been on the road. So they're still trying to make a decision there, it seems like, for the 2024 class. But, yeah, in 2025, they've put out a couple offers, offered one that I really, really like out of Johnson High School down there in San Antonio. Ty Hawkins, he was the MVP of his district, had just a massive sophomore season, over 3,000 yards of total offense, 37 touchdowns. That a program that's really not one that everyone thinks of as being a powerhouse in San Antonio. He was really, really good there. So he's a new offer. They're still looking at more 2025 quarterbacks as well, as I think they're trying to get out ahead of things in that class, maybe more so than they did in the 2024 class in particular. But that's mostly because the 2025 class, as far as quarterbacks in the state of Texas, is really, really good, and one that I think Baylor will have a lot of success landing one of the top quarterbacks in the state.
So we had a little bit of a discussion about this yesterday. We had to be careful to let people know that we were just speculating and there wasn't anything to report. And there's still nothing to report on Baylor's starting quarterback position or decision or whatever. But now we're, about 2 weeks removed from the spring game. and the semester will be winding down here pretty soon. I doubt that they would, pop open a graphic in like mid-June, because I don't just, it seems like it wouldn't be the ideal time if you're looking for attention. But how do you read the tea leaves when it comes to the fact that they have not named a starting quarterback, and what does that say, if anything, to you?
It's a really weird situation, because I think when Dave Aranda made those comments after the spring game, everyone just kind of anticipated a decision coming really quickly, honestly, within the next week. And it never came, and now it's kind of dragging out a little bit. And, to me, that leads me to believe that they're pushing the decision back to the fall, which I think is the smart decision. I don't really see a need to rush naming a quarterback. You might as well keep the competition open. Both guys, I think, should have an opportunity in the fall to win that job. But on the flip side, if they saw something, which it seems like Dave Aranda felt like he saw something in one of these two quarterbacks to make a decision, then I guess you go ahead and do it. But yeah, you're right. The further this drags out, the less likely it is, especially once you reach the end of the semester. It'd be hard for me to believe that Baylor would go ahead and just throw up a graphic and name a starting quarterback. So I do think as of right now, my expectation is this is pushed to the fall. But honestly, back when he said that we're going to potentially name a quarterback, I really felt like they were going to do that. So it's a very puzzling situation, but maybe one that we'll get more clarity on when fall camp rolls around.
Yeah, Grayson, also we talked about, like, this is a different situation than a year ago when they made the decision with Blake and Gary, because had they made the decision earlier and just say it was Sawyer, hypothetically, then they only have one scholarship quarterback if history played out the exact same way. So they weren't in the same position to do the same thing while the portal was still open.
For sure. And I think what people kind of forget from that decision was, Gary, I think they felt like the way Gary had been around the program for a while, the way that he'd handled and conducted himself, the fact that he was technically a graduate transfer as well. I think all of that played a huge role in kind of that decision by the staff. And then also, they had Kyron Drones on the roster as well. So you had another scholarship quarterback there just in case something happened to Blake Shapen. So, two totally different situations. I don't think this is a situation where they were like, hey, we want to make sure that both these guys are here, so that's why we're not going to make a decision. I really don't think it was that. But I could see how someone could convince themselves that it was.
What else is kind of on the radar for you right now, Grayson?
I think actually this past week, a big thing that everyone's been trying to figure out is actually the basketball side of things. Because Yves Misty decided to reclassify to the 2023 class. He ended up signing with Baylor, and that was a big story that we, released earlier this week. So that's been a huge one, because everyone's trying to figure out, what's this Baylor basketball roster going to look like? How are they going to, handle things as Adam Flagler and Jalen Bridges test the NBA waters? How does the staff try to figure out ways to add players to the roster that don't necessarily show that they're moving on from those two guys that they really, really want back on the roster for next season? So, basketball's been a big part of it. Recruiting, obviously, that never stops. But currently right now, it's kind of one of those phases where we're just kind of waiting on the June official visit. So right now, a lot of this is the coaches on the road, players trying to figure out their schedules as far as official visits go. And then Baylor trying to figure out, who's coming on the official visits, who are the priorities that we need to get on official visits. Those type of things are kind of dominating the headlines right now.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was just pouring through, just like Googling Baylor, and I see this very panicky all caps headlines from, there's a very dramatic. Are you from another place about like the transfer portal and lack of activity? Are you on like a certain high level of anxiety as far as that goes as well, or are you confident that they're okay and the roster is going to shape up just fine?
Craig, are you talking about the basketball or the football side? Because basketball, okay, because people have been panicking on the football side as well.
And they've added like 12 guys. What?
12. Yeah, you're right. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
12.
But yeah, you're right. On the basketball side of things, though, I don't get why people are panicking right now. And this was actually something that I brought up on the website that I think for all college basketball fans and all Baylor fans specifically need to remember that, yes, Adam Flagler and Jalen Bridges are testing the NBA waters. but there are also a ton of other guys that are testing the NBA waters as well. So when people say, oh, the transfer portal is watering down, you're missing out on top targets, well, not really, because there's a lot of guys that are testing the NBA waters, and then if they do decide to return to college, they might be transferring from their current school. So I guess my line of thinking is, even if Flagler and Bridges stay in the draft, I do think there's going to be some very, very high quality guys that Baylor could land, specifically because you're game to sell like, hey, we just lost Adam Flagler and Jalen Bridges. Both guys played over 30 minutes a game. So why don't you come to Baylor and get to play 30 minutes per game on a top 10, potentially top 10 college basketball team? That's very, very enticing to a lot of guys. And so I really wouldn't panic at all. Baylor just got another big, adding Yves Misty. So they have another 7-footer on the roster, which was something they really needed last year. So now it's really just about rounding things out with a couple more starters, whether it's Flagler and Bridges or 2 transfer guys that could come in and start right away. So, yeah, I wouldn't panic. If you're a Baylor fan panicking, I really wouldn't right now, because I think Scott Drew and the staff really have a good handle on the pulse of things right now.
Yeah, you got to trust the guy who's been pretty darn consistent here lately. Maybe they forgot what happened 2 years ago. But, Grayson, also, I would think, and this is maybe being too optimistic, but just based on what we know of the 2 guys in the portal and and where they are, I would say at worst 50% of those guys are, gone, and that one of them is probably coming back.
For
basketball, for Jalen Bridges and Adam Flagler, I would say that at least one of them is going to be back.
I would say that I think Bridges is probably the one that I would put the higher percentage on coming back, just because I do think if he did come back, there's a case to be made that he could end up being a first-round pick, which I don't think he would be at this point. Flagler is a little bit different because I don't think his draft stock's going to change in a year. But then on the flip side, it's like, do you just want to go to the NBA, potentially just be in the G League for a while, or do you want to come back and have a chance to not end your career with a round of 32 exit and in your career with a possible championship with a team that's really, really good? That's just going to be an interesting question and an interesting conundrum for him, because he has been in college for a long time. But I think you're right. I think there's a great chance that at least one of them comes back. But I still think I'd probably put the percentage right around 50% that both come back as well.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Grayson. I think that, pessimistically, I don't see. I mean, this is my most pessimistic. I just don't see them both going at this point in their careers. Now, and I completely agree with what you said. Flagler, older guy, why not just try out the pros right now if that's what you are, where you are personally in your growth. All right, Grayson, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Enjoy the weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.
Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com. Next, Ross Dellinger from Sports Illustrated.